So, on this episode of Digital Marketing Stories, I have probably my most enigmatic guest so far. It's Peter Murphy Lewis, who is also known as Strategic Pete. So, do I call you Pete, Peter Murphy, or Strategic Pete? Which would you prefer?
Any of those are better than what my wife calls me certain nights. So I don't, you can call me whatever you like, Jim. My clients call me Pete. My mom calls me Peter. Whatever's good for you.
I always say that the only people that call me James are police, doctors, and bank managers. And everyone else calls me Jim. So you're probably the same, like Pete or Pete. Stick with Pete.
Okay.
So Pete, you're a fractional CMO. Your route to where you are now. So you started life in Kansas, and you've worked in Boston, and now I believe you're in Chile. Is that right? Is it Chile or Chile? I don't know.
Chile, either's fine. So I spent 15 years full-time in Chile. I currently go to Chile every year. I still have a home in Chile, but I have an 8-year-old son who goes to school most time of the year here in Wichita, Kansas. So my second home, where I reside mostly, is in the middle of the United States.
And you definitely take the biscuit in terms of, like, most marketers I talk to, they really struggle to talk about themselves. I think you've done a phenomenal job. Certainly when I was looking at your website to do some research here, you've done a great job of packaging up the Strategic Pete sort of solution. So tell me a little bit about the business. What made you decide to set that business up?
Strategic Pete's born organically out of two big transitions. So when I moved back to the US, I didn't have the network that most marketers would have, given I'd spent 15 years outside the country. My first project was like a scaling project for a client who went from like one marketer to 5 and needed to 2x its revenue. We built that project, and after about 6 months, we decided to disengage, and they kept me on doing strategy. And my next gig, so that was kind of like my first kind of retainer client from a strategy point of view. My next client was a turnaround private equity project. So the private equity bought a distressed asset, and they asked me to help rebrand it, turn it around, and sell it. We did that. And while I was doing those two projects, I figured out kind of 3 things. One is I love solving problems. So I don't want that ongoing retainer of doing the same thing every 6 months. Rather, I like solve problems. And then if my team wants to pass it off and handle that as retainer. The second thing is I like working with my same team of people as operators. So at Strategic Pete, there's 15 of us. The majority of them start as interns with me. 13 out of 15 were interns with me. And then the last item is I like to make people a lot of money. And as a fractional chief marketing officer, you have a runway of 6 to 18 months to help people make a lot of money, and then you usually disengage. And those 3 things lined up from that first gig and strategy to the second gig and the turnaround. And I realized I liked this revolving door of me having to replace myself and make someone money and then get out.
Yeah. Yeah. Funny. I had a guest on previously, Ben Hone, he was fractional CMO, and he said that he definitely liked the climbing up, the ascent, rather than actually reaching the summit. For him, all the excitement was in getting to the summit, not the actual summit itself. All that sort of stuff bored him, right? Are you like in the same boat? Sounds like you are.
Similar, and sticking to the summit metaphor, same thing. When I ran a marathon 5 years ago and then ran an ultra marathon that was about 100K 4.5 years ago, I enjoyed the journey. When I won both of those races, I was like, oh, this is boring. I had to go find something else. If they would have added 10 more kilometers at the end of the race, I think I would probably enjoy the race more.
So you feel you need to push yourself to the limit and then beyond the limit to really get the full value. So what are the biggest challenges? I mean, one of the things I really enjoy the research process of kind of guests as much as anything. So one of the things I really enjoyed, like reading your profile, you like I said, Chile figured in the profile, but it also said you lived in a zoo or in a, was it a zoo? I mean, I couldn't quite work out what that.
You're speaking to me right now in the middle of a zoo. There are zebras, about 15 zebras that are 20 meters behind me, and there are about 20 cheetahs that are about 50 meters in front of me right now.
I hope they're in cages.
They are in cages. There's a movie out of Hollywood, probably 10 or 15 years ago, called I Bought a Zoo. And I believe the main character was, oh, I can't think of Matt Damon. So I always tell people I'm the fat version of Matt Damon without the $5 million to drop on a zoo.
It's funny when you're talking about I'm the this person of that. The one that always makes me laugh is I've got a friend who we sat in the bar at a conference. I think it was Traffic and Conversion Summit. She says, Jim, I've known you for like 15 years. I have no idea what you do. And I tried to explain to her, and I said to her, a bit like yourself, I'm a bit of a troubleshooter. I said, I go in, I fix problems. So usually people come to me when they've got kicked out of Google or kicked out of Facebook, need some help, need somebody to kind of like send something up the flagpole to try and get something sorted out. So I said, I'm basically a problem solver, a fixer. She said, so you're sort of like Ray Donovan, right? And having watched Ray Donovan, right? I don't know if you've ever watched it, but he's a Los Angeles based fixer. But I said, yeah, I'm sort of like the digital marketing Ray Donovan, but without the baseball bat, right? So I don't tend to kind of like use violence to get my resolutions. But yeah, I mean, and again, I'm like yourself. That's one of the things I really enjoy, right? I enjoy the execution side of things, on the marketing side of things. I'm probably less interested in the strategic side of things. I prefer people to come to me with the problem, having they've gone through that sort of strategic process. But on the execution side of things, that's where I feel I am my keeper. I always say I put more money on the table than I'll ever take off it, right? So for me, it's never about, people will never go, oh, I don't really think that's particularly good value for money, because the money that was there is incremental to what they have. And I'm stunned at how many businesses, even 7-8 figure businesses, that are still leaving so much money on the table. What are the biggest kind of things that you see companies that probably should know better making mistakes doing?
Ooh, I was hoping you were going to give me a moment to mention that I could have met Ray Donovan at the Traffic and Conversion convention.
You could have met me.
But you hit me with a harder. I would say the most common mistake that I see from in my role as a fractional CMO is executives and CEOs hiring agencies without a strategy. Now, I believe that 9 out of 10 agencies, if they have case studies on their website, they specialize in your niche, and they stay in their lane, and they do 1 to 3 things great, they're going to be good at it, 9 out of 10. But they're going to be good at the things that they're good at, not at necessarily what you hire them for, what your business goal is. So the number one mistake I see is hiring agencies without a strategy and not making sure that what the agency's great at lines up with your business objectives. I walk into so many clients who have 3 to 7 agencies that shouldn't have been hired because they don't have anything to do with the quarterly or annual goals that the executives hired them for. All the time.
Yeah. I think it's quite interesting. I've always maintained that agencies get hired for expertise or utility, right? And the ones that get hired for utility are the ones that usually don't last very long, right? If you have an expertise, as you say, somebody's got a specialist skill in paid search or email marketing, inboxing. Certainly if you're working in some verticals where you've got restricted products, there's definitely some challenges in terms of getting your product to market. The agencies that can come with the expertise of knowing what buttons to press, which people to talk to move the chains. I mean, that's definitely going to be one of those things where people will add value immensely because you're hiring them for their expertise. But, I think a lot of agencies make the mistake of saying that they can do things that they really can't do, right? So everyone says, oh yeah, we can do everything, right? And the reality of it is they might do 2 things really well, and the other 7 things that you'll get asked to do, you do them in a really mediocre way or even badly, right? And I think that's one of the challenges that sometimes, again, it's very easy for an agency to walk away, but they just leave the pile of shit that they've left with the client, right? With the client. And the client then goes down the route of the next agency that they talk to, they make them to blame for the previous agency. So I've always gone, I try and look to see how many agencies have preceded us when looking at possibly taking on a piece of business. Because if they've had 6 agencies beforehand and they've all bombed, right, then there's every likelihood that no matter how good I think we are, we're probably going to bomb as well, right? Because I think sometimes the client doesn't allow you the freedom to be able to speak openly and solve the
Mhm.
problems that they're asking you to solve, right? They go,
Mhm.
I want you to solve this problem. I want you to do it this way, this way, this way, this way. And it's like, it doesn't work that way, right? You've got to give me
Mhm.
the autonomy to be able to get on and do it.
Yeah. I thought of something else. I feel like this might be changing, but a huge mistake that I see, Jim, is non-marketing executives, usually the CEO, focus on attribution. And attribution, at least in the B2B world, is so broken right now across so many different channels. And they want to tie every marketing movement to a dollar. And you can do that at the quarterly level. You could even do it at maybe at the monthly, but trying to figure out where every single lead comes from in this world where that people are talking in Slack channels and Facebook channels and Discord and at traffic conversion summits. Attribution isn't as clean as it was 5 years ago.
And I've always maintained that the business is only as good as the data that the people that are actually handling the leads is feeding back, right? I mean, as much as anything, as an agency, I thrive on feedback, right? I mean, as much as anything, I just want the salespeople to be able to say to me, Jim, the leads you're generating are great. Get me more of them. Or Jim, the leads are not great, and these are the reasons why, very specifically, whether it's out of area, not the right qualification, right? Because there's things we can do in terms of the ad copy and things like that. But equally, right, even though the kind of on the advertising side of things, it's typically lead generations, it's ones and zeros. Is it you generated a lead or you didn't generate a lead? Ultimately, the business doesn't want leads; they want sales, right? So they want the leads
Mhm.
to qualify, and then want them to have the salespeople work them through a system, ultimately at the other end as a converted lead that turns into a dollar amount that they can then sort of tie back to the original point of entry, right? And I think that's where I think a lot of businesses do a poor job. They don't have the ability to feed that back in, right, in the way that they ought to help the agency do better, the ad platforms that are sending the traffic to train their algorithms better. But equally, it's not just the ones that converted, the ones that didn't convert. Why didn't they convert? And you can do a lot more with that.
Yeah, and especially at the higher tier types of services, at least for me and my clients, LinkedIn is so critical right now, and organic LinkedIn. And the only way you're gonna capture that is if your SDR or your sales team says, "Have you met somebody on our team? Have you been following us?" Right? Like, everything that you're trying to pull over from a tech point of view is never gonna say, "I've been watching Jim post on LinkedIn for the last week," right? It's gonna tell me some ad or some web page or some lead magnet or some webinar. And there's some extra layers on top of the already existing marketing channels or marketing motion that might be the extra reason they booked a call with you.
I've always maintained that there's a big discussion that usually takes place with brands to say, I don't want to bid on my brand. I don't want to give Google money for my brand and stuff like that, because they go, if somebody's typed in my brand, they know who I am, right? And I've always maintained that if you've got good social media activity going on organically, and I noticed that you're an expert at organic, and I really want to talk to you a little bit about that. But if you are good at sort of generating visibility on social media platforms organically, the logical next step
Uh-huh.
for a lot of people, once they've been to, say, Facebook or Instagram or whatever it might be, is to then go to Google and type in the brand. They don't know anything about your brand, right? They've been exposed to,
Mhm.
may have been exposed to a video or a meme or something like that, but they know nothing about your brand in terms of who you are, what sort of services you offer, pricing, none of that, right? So when they actually get to Google and type in your brand, right, they're completely an unknown entity, right? And the brands that don't bid on their own brand name, right, because they don't want to give Google
Mhm.
money, are leaving so much money on the table because of that, right? Because again, you
Mhm.
can say, if it's an existing customer, you can have them in a specific audience, right? And you can target them based on the fact that they know who you are because you've got them in a database, you've got the CRM data, feed that to Google, say, these are my existing customers. If they type a brand search, right, they're probably looking for, again, it could be they're looking to download the product that they bought from you before. Let's say it was an ebook. They got an ebook from you before. They know they've got it. They can't remember where they filed it in their email system, right? So they go, oh, just go and request another one, right? So you should be able to know that that person's been to you before and offer them a different experience when they search for your brand than somebody who's never known come into contact with your brand before. And it's amazing how many
Jim, it
brands.
happened to me last night. Yeah, last night when my wife goes to bed earlier than I like to go down rabbit holes on what is the next camper van that I'm gonna purchase. Don't tell her this. Hopefully she doesn't listen to this podcast. But, like, so 9 o'clock at night last night, I watched this video of a person who had decked out their new Ford pickup with like a rooftop tent on it and all these side panels and all these extra awnings and so forth. And it did exactly what you just described. I Googled the name of all of the third-party accessories that went on top of this truck, and I went through their web pages, subscribed to their newsletters and so forth. That person is going to think that it was straight up Google if they didn't pay for an ad. If they paid for an ad, they're going to think it's straight up the ad. They probably need to make sure that they're thinking about SEO and the ad, but it was their work that they did with some partnership on YouTube that's going to be really hard for them to ever figure out until they talk to me and ask me.
I think we've almost gone a full 360. I think when we first started doing digital marketing, money was moving from TV, radio, and print into it because it was so much more trackable, accountable than TV, radio, and print, right? So yes, I spent money on TV advertising, but I don't really know how many of the sales I generated came from that or came from a radio station or whatever it might be. And with the digital stuff, you could say exactly which keyword, what search term, how much it costs. You could do ROI calculations. For B2B, you can see exactly how much a lead cost because you knew exactly where it came from, what the keyword was, and everything else, right? But it's almost like we're going full circle, right? So you're into the realms now where influencer marketing is much more prevalent, right? And ultimately, an influencer could put something out there and you'll generate a bunch of sales, but you don't know if it was, say you have 5 influencers doing some work for you. You don't know which one of those 5 it was. It could be because you had 5 of them. That could be what sort of got it over the line, right? So, and then there's the kind of the dark social where, you have the halo effect of people sharing things, right? So they get it posted on, they've got an FB CLID that kind of comes from somebody posting something from Facebook. They grab the URL, send it to a friend, and it gets credited to the original click, which might be me, but you've then got it. You may send it to another 3 or 4 friends. Everything gets credited to me rather than to you, right? So, and I'm amazed at how much data is captured there, but so many businesses just lose it. Right. And I was really interested to talk to you because you are a data-driven marketer, right? Which to me is like, that's my kind of holy grail. I love data-driven marketers because I've always been about the data. That's what I've sort of thrived on is data. So what are your thoughts in terms of the data that people should be capturing that they're not?
I guess to answer it, I usually walk into those types of calls or relationships or prospects trying to figure out how much data they have already lined up. In a more sophisticated client who's further down their marketing maturation or evolution, I try to think about what are some of the more I'm trying to think of the word. It's not gray. It's not some of the more between the cracks metrics. So I will look at sales cycles, or I will think about how many touches and with a prospect did we have to talk to before they talk to a salesperson or before they jump on a demo type of thing. For clients who are, I have a significant amount of clients whose first 2 months is setting up a marketing scorecard, and they don't realize that they would have never needed to talk to me if they would have had a marketing scorecard. What happens is they get a new website, they design a new website, or they change CRMs, or they do something on to SEO, and all of their metrics start to tank. But they didn't have a marketing scorecard. So they didn't see that their traffic was dropping 20% monthly, or they didn't see that their MQLs 6 months ago moved from 300 a month down to 250, down to 200. And if they would have had these simple scorecards, they would have had leading indicators to let them know that this quarter they were going to be destroyed from a revenue point of view and they wouldn't need me. That's the gamut that I see of the metrics that I'm asking my clients to put together or that I have to string together for them. Do you have any insight into what you're seeing?
I mean, it always amazes me when people say for no apparent reason, and you're like, well, you're not looking at the data properly because there's lots of apparent reasons, right? I mean, I used to sell insurance for a living. That was one of the things I did when I sort of first started working. I mean, I did 6 years working for the police, and then I sold insurance for a living, knocking on doors and cold calling and everything else, right? And I've always maintained, I mean, I did it for 6 years. I was good at selling. Then I moved on to sales management, and I've always maintained as a sales manager, the only thing you can manage is the input of the appointments that people do. So it's, if you wanted to close 4 pieces of business a week, right, you needed to probably do 5 or 6 fact finds. So you had to sit down and ask people to explain what their situation was in terms of retirement and whether they had life insurance, that sort of thing. And in order to get those 6 face-to-face questionnaires, you probably needed to make about 15 appointments, right? And in order to get the 15 appointments, you needed to have about 50 prospects to call, right? So if I started the week with anything less than 50 prospects, right, I could guarantee the snowball effect would be my 50, if I only had 40 people to call, my sort of 15 appointments would probably be more like 10, right? My 6 fact finds would probably be more like 3, and I'd end up with 2 pieces of business. So in most sort of sales situations, you can always say the only thing I can manage is the activity. I can't necessarily manage the output, right? So, but if the activity was solid and the output wasn't, right, then you have probably a training issue. If the activity is not there, then you have a kind of, I guess, a kind of people are just probably lazy or whatever, right? So I think it's, when you look at sort of data in the digital marketing sphere, right, you're absolutely right. I mean, I think we're at the point now where people have just seen the cost of Facebook traffic increase. On the search side of things, you've seen more and more search being not done on sort of search engines in the traditional way that they've been done. More and more people are now using ChatGPT, Perplexity. They're getting to the same answer as they may have got to before, but they're not doing it in the traditional 10 blue links, right, that they used to do it for, and they've done it for donkey's years, right? So I think that's something that I think a lot of businesses are not, they haven't sort of set up their dashboards now for understanding how AI is impacting the leads that are coming in, right? So they're just saying our traffic's down, right? But it might be that the traffic that in the traditional sense of where it's normally come from is down, right? But if the lead volume is not down, then it's probably because people found you in an alternative way than the way that you may have been measuring in the past, right? So you need to say, well, now we need to try and find a different way of measuring that. And there's so many people who come out with Looker Studio reports that will do that sort of thing, where they'll kind of look more about the GPT-based sort of search results that have come through. I know that Will Reynolds is doing a lot of stuff on that. Rand Fishkin's doing a lot of stuff on that. But again, I think it's just understanding. I mean, I've always said that as a marketer, you need to be looking ahead so that when you come back to where you are now, right, you can be coming in with kind of ideas and solutions for what's to come rather than what's happened in the past, right? Because once it's gone, right? You can't really change it.
Yeah, I've been playing around with best ways to position my clients into the different AI tools out there. And when I start testing a new playbook or a new strategy, I always do it in-house first. So like my traffic and my word of mouth and my growth is strong enough offline from giving keynotes and all the press that we get, that I can play with our variables, or I can play with our marketing tactics, and it won't have an impact. But it's really interesting to see what's happening right now on the AI tools and how it understands who I am and where I'm showing up, whether it be fractional CMO or documentary or TV stuff or agency things, and they vary from one to another. So now my team is setting up, I think there's 5 different SEO or 5 different LLM SEO trackers that we're now using that send us a report once a week. How many times have you been mentioned? What's bringing it in? Now try to figure out how we structure that information in a way that gets into the LLMs is like our next goal that we have to figure out, so then we can help with clients.
I think that's the thing, is that certainly when you read around the sort of subject, there is so much known about LLMs now, right, in terms of how you get the information in there, that again, it's almost like the good old days of SEO from the sort of the early 2000s, late 90s, 2000s, right, where you can like completely manipulate the way in which the results are presented, right? I don't necessarily know that you'd get the same sort of outcome here, but you may. I don't know. I mean, it's
Yeah,
funny.
same with Reddit.
Yeah, yeah. Reddit exactly the same.
Sorry, I interrupted you.
No, that's okay. Yeah, I mean, so absolutely. I mean, Reddit is one of those things where the people that have done well with Reddit, and maybe you could even throw Quora in there as well, right? I know a lot of people that have done incredibly well, right? Just basically going into Quora, and people have asked a question, right? And they'll go over to YouTube, shoot a video, and say, "Hey, I've created a video response to that question," right? And if the question kind of comes up more often than not, right, then you can say, "Okay, maybe I can provide a solution to that standard question that lots and lots of people have," right? So the more people upvote the question, the more likely it is that everyone is experiencing the same challenge, headache, problem, whatever it is.
Yeah.
So you're one of the things that I read was that you're very into kind of organic social rather than paid. I mean, I've always been a paid advertising guy. So talk to me a little bit about the organic social landscape as it stands now.
Yeah, so it's changing coming from what we're talking about with SEO and now with AI tools. There are things that I do from an organic point of view that then I move over to PPC. So I really enjoy taking what works best on LinkedIn or TikTok or anything on Meta, and then I will find a way to then spend money on it. So the way that we're doing that is just straight up LinkedIn. We'll figure out what are the best engagements, what's trending. We'll try to figure out what is the emotional reason that worked, or what is the copy that worked. It might not translate to another platform if we move that over to PPC on Meta, but we can take on nuances. Another thing that I do, there's a very simple tool that's been around, I don't know, probably for 10 years, called Q Promote. Q Promote, I think it's $50 or $100 a month, and it allows you to push out your organic content, the content on your website, out to everyone who is trying to manage their social media handles, and they want to push out content that's helpful to their ICP, make sure their handles are active, and you can figure out what are the titles of the content that you're pushing from your blog over to Q Promote that's been pushed out onto X and Meta and LinkedIn, and your image, and that will help you determine how much money where you should put your money on PPC. And I think that that's my favorite low hanging fruit for anyone who has a budget over $10,000 a month. I am testing there first for $50, and I'm seeing things get shared. My top trending article just from last quarter, from Q4, had 1,997 shares from a blog that I pushed out. So then I just find the context of that blog. I think about the image and the title, and then I put that on PPC, but I do a video about it. And then I put it also on YouTube. And YouTube, I'm not paying for it, but it's telling me what I should be doing from a video content point of view.
Yeah, so I'm amazed at how, some of the things that you can learn on one platform can transfer so well onto other platforms, but people are just not doing it, right? I mean, the YouTube algorithm ecosystem, all the people that kind of the content creators on YouTube, they really understand how the YouTube algorithm works. Again, I understand sort of to a certain point how the PPC algorithms work and how the traffic gets delivered and everything else. But it's amazing how many people that do organic just won't do paid at all, right? So I'm pleased that you're like the guy that will straddle both, because it's amazing how many people don't. They go, I only do organic social and that's it, right? And I feel like they're leaving so much on the table because of that, right? There's so much, as you say, if you've tested organically something that works really well, right? The rocket fuel is the paid search that you can apply to that, because you're not having to. It bothers me so much when people say, I'm just going to spend some money on Facebook ads and test and test and test. It's like, I don't want to be running tests. I want to be like doing slam dunks. I want to be taking free throws from like 3 feet away from the hoop above it, right? I don't want to even think about missing a shot, right? I don't want to be spending $1,000 on a test. I want it, or $10,000 or whatever it is, right? Because it's like the only people that benefit from that are Facebook or Google, right? They're the only ones that benefit from e-testing all the time, right? So I want to use the tools available to me to enable me to kind of like have to eliminate all those sort of testing sort of environments, because you've done something organically. If it works well organically, there's every reason why it would work on a pay side of things as well. Plus, you can use the kind of the social proof that you've got on the organic post to like really do the amplification. You're not starting from a 000. You're starting from, in your case, 2,000 shares. It's like that proves that that what was in there was resonating with an audience enough for them to go, this is share work.
This is Gary Vee's new favorite topic. He just published a book around how do you get people's attention, and his kind of playbook is do it organically, and then you can move over to PPC and you can save a lot of money in how you get people's attention on different channels. I mean, no matter where you stand politically speaking, the person who's fantastic at doing this organically and then moving over is Trump. Right? Like he throws spaghetti at the wall on every type of social channel that he can, on legacy media, on new media, on podcasts, and then he can figure out what's getting traction, and then he'll put that into ads, or he'll just turn that into one of his talking points. And we're in a new era for marketing when it comes to that, and you can see it even at the political level.
I did some analysis of the amount of money that both Trump and Harris were spending in the run up to the election. I mean, again, I keep thinking, why don't I do political advertising? But again, it would be the last thing I'd want to do. But the amount of money that was being spent was eye-watering, right? But again, I think Harris was probably outspending Trump on ads by probably $7 or $8 to 1, right? So, but I think, as you say, he had probably done his homework and his research and spread it around so that the dollars that he was spending were much more strategic and tactical rather than just spray and pray. So in terms of the kind of the challenges that you see, I think one of the things I saw on your social, you posted that all CEOs should have a podcast. What is it about podcasts that you think CEOs should embrace?
I might have come in a little bit heavy on that, but I do believe that the majority of CEOs who are in the B2B space, that their audience, their clientele, or their prospects are on LinkedIn. I think that it's a perfect place for you to create content where you can show off what is unique about you as a human being. And people like to follow people more than they do brands. So you can grow revenue for your company by using your personal brand. And it's a perfect place for you might not even have to be the smartest person in the room. Like Jim, you might be technical. So you might be the smartest person in the room when it comes to being technical, but when it comes to marketing or sales or customer service, maybe not. So that gives you a chance to be the nicest person in the room. And I ran a podcast for the private equity turnaround project that I did for about 3 years. And I wasn't the smartest person in the room. I wasn't even close to my ICP, but it gave me the opportunity to be the nicest, most inquisitive, curious person as a podcast host, and therefore make my ICP look spectacular, which then got me invited to a bunch of trade shows and a bunch of keynotes. So I think that it is a one-to-one situation, a podcast like we have right now, that a CEO who might be an introvert or might have limited time can then amplify their voice. Even if they are extroverted, it's going to allow them to amplify their voice to every other platform with that content from a podcast. I just think that it's low-hanging fruit. Now, one thing that I see people overplaying is non-marketing CEOs don't realize that podcasts are not very discoverable, right? So if I've never met Maria, and she's a great podcast host and she has a great podcast, there's a chance that Spotify and Apple and so forth is never going to push it to me. But you know who will? LinkedIn will push it to you, and so will YouTube Shorts. They'll push it to you. So don't just sit on your hands and do a podcast. Go to the channels that will then push that out to your ICP so they can see what you're great at.
Yeah, because I think Spotify they've tried to push the whole video podcasting, the clips, right? But again, they're just trying to steal from other people that have done that already, right? So I was reading that on TubeFilter today that YouTube now has over 1 billion users per month that consume podcasts on the YouTube platform, right? Which completely dwarfs what's happening on Spotify and Apple. And all they're doing is, yeah, well, if it's not if it's video, then it's not a podcast. It's like, who says, right? I mean, who are we to say whether it's video or audio and whether one's a podcast or not, right? I mean, ultimately, I try and cover off all bases, right? So audio and video, right? So not audio only, as I know a lot of people are doing at the moment.
Well, I mean, to your point, one of the reasons that I moved to listening to podcasts on YouTube in the last 2 weeks actually is because I don't like the way that Spotify helps me discover new episodes and new podcasts. I feel like I get stuck and listen to the same 15 podcasts that I'm subscribed to, and Spotify doesn't know how to push me new material. And because I like the way that YouTube pushes me new material, I'm testing them for podcasts.
And definitely on the sort of short shelf, right? If you're on a desktop in the short shelf, although there's definitely some big players on there, they always include sort of shorts from new people with like new channels, hardly any subscribers, right? Again, I've seen some of my shorts get like next to no views at all, right? But I've seen others that get like 700, 800, which again, you might think, well, in the scheme of things, that's not a big deal, right? Certainly compared to these people that are jumping ropes and jumping in puddles and things like that. But that's not my audience. I don't care. I want to see the 700 people. If they're relevant to my kind of niche, then great. That's I know that I've achieved my objective in that regard. So, but
Going back to your point, Jim, about why podcasts are helpful for CEOs or at least some type of customer facing executive on the team is the impact of long form storytelling in somebody's ear has so much bigger impact than an influencer posting a video for 60 seconds or 2 minutes or 3 minutes, right? So if I listen to Jim 3 times for 30 minutes and he comes off the sincere, authentic, friendly, asks good questions, he stays in his lane, he tells me what he's smart at, what he's not, he asks a good question, that has a huge impact on the way that I trust your brand, as opposed to if I just consume a 60-second clip or even a 2-minute clip or even an ad that's pushed in my face. It just makes me trust you and remember you.
yeah, it's funny. I think you mentioned there about LinkedIn, and I think one of the biggest successes that LinkedIn has that they don't probably a lot of people don't even realize it exists is that video reels shelf that kind of like appears on LinkedIn. And again, there's so many people I know are doing incredibly well on the back of having content on that video shelf, right? Because video is being pushed really hard by LinkedIn now, right? Probably far more so than the carousels and the kind of text-based stuff. They're definitely trying to push the video because more and more people are consuming content that way, right? That's what they're looking for. They're looking for the videos that will give you the behind the scenes or that type of information, right? Because again, it's taking you to places where yes, we can all read the kind of the 10Q and see exactly what's gone on, the safe harbor statements, all that sort of stuff. That doesn't really personalize the business. Whereas if you put the person in front of a camera, right, or in front of a microphone and they talk to people, again, it doesn't necessarily need to be them talking all the time. They could be doing what we're doing. We could be interviewed. Like I've really enjoyed this podcasting journey because I'm meeting people that I don't know. In some cases, people I do know already fine, right? But equally, I'm learning about things that I'm taking me outside of my comfort zone. I know all the stuff I know about really well, but I'm learning so much from the guests that I've had. So in some respects, it's almost like that's for me, I'm the biggest fan of my own podcast because I'm learning so much from the guests that I've had, including yourself, right? It's been a phenomenal journey for me, right? And I'm sure that most CEOs would probably have the same experience if they took the time to invest in a microphone, lights, cameras, and just sitting down and talking, right? Because initially, when you first start, nobody's going to see it anyway, right? So who cares, right? But if you're good at it and you come across well, then you can really do well to put yourself in a position that's different from where your competitors are.
Yeah, to that point of speaking to your ICP and also putting yourself in a different position, when I started my podcast, before I hit record, I would tell my guests, I would say, hey, during the podcast, you feel free to pitch, promote yourself as much as possible. I did my research. I know that you're good. I know that you're trustworthy. There's good reviews about you online. What you're going to say is if you share your opinion, whether it's about yourself or someone else, my audience is going to find it's valuable. So make sure that you do that. And then I'd say at the end, as I work for this X client, and this is the product we serve, you're in this space. When we turn off record, do you mind if I ask you 3 or 4 questions about how you solve this pain point? And I wasn't selling them something. They already worked with one of my competitors. 99% of the time, I would ask them, what are the things that they need next year so I could improve my product? How do they go about making decisions from a budgetary point of view? If for some reason they were unable to work with their current competitor, how would they go about, or with my current competitor, how would they go about finding who is the next solution? So who would they would talk to, who they would trust, what were the budgetary things? That would help me. And I said that before we started the interview. So that gave them 45 minutes where then I'm now talking to them as friendly relationship. They trust me. They know I'm not going to send some type of sales development rep on top of them. I was trying to understand them, and we build up that rapport over the last 45 minutes where I made them look like a rock star.
I love that. That's great. I might steal that for future reference. But yeah, I mean, it like, honestly, like for me, I've achieved a lot, but in some regards, the podcast has been such a breath of fresh air for me in terms of my journey, in terms of where I am, right? And again, I've helped. I hope I've helped some of the people that have been on the podcast as a guest to kind of like amplify their stories, right? Because again, it's not about me, it's not my stories, it's about them and their stories, right? And what they're trying to achieve in their specific realm. Again, I've been very forceful in trying to make sure that I have a mixture of women and men, seniority and people that are like brand new. Again, I've been trying ever since I got into the industry, because I've got like daughters that work in the industry. I've been really trying to help put more women in positions of authority and seniority in the companies that they work in, right? By giving them like a leg up. And it's not that I don't think that they would get up there on their own. It's just like sometimes I can just move things out of the way and help put them in the position, right? Knowing that they're going to do a phenomenal job when they get the opportunity to kind of speak, right? So, you know, and I just think that that's helped the industry to become more balanced, right? When I first started doing it, I mean, it was like completely like probably 98% men, 2% women, right? And the 2% women were probably the ones that could drink everyone under the table at the networking events and everything else. But I think it's evolved and changed, right? We've, again, in the affiliate industry, we've gone away from booth babes and sexualizing trade shows and things like that, right, to make it much more professional. And again, I think it was long overdue. Glad it happened, but it continues to evolve, and it will only continue to evolve if you help sort of put people up on a pedestal to give them the opportunity to tell their story and tell people what they're all about. So Pete, this has been phenomenal. I've loved having you on as a guest today. If people did want to kind of reach out to you, what would be the best place for them to get hold of you?
LinkedIn is the best. I believe that I am the only Peter Murphy Lewis on LinkedIn. So connect with me there. Tell me that you love Jim's podcast and what you found value about the conversation. If I can help you in any way, you can find me on my website, strategicpete.com.
And all of those links will be available in the show notes, which should be available after we finish the show and get it up into the big wide world. Only remains for me to say thank you so much for being a phenomenal guest. Love meeting you, and hopefully at some point in time, if I find myself in Kansas or in Chile that you happen to be crossing paths, or if you're ever in the UK, let me know. I'd love to sit down and grab a drink with you.
Love it. I go over to the UK at least once a year for a client, so I'll see you there.
Marvelous. Thanks a lot. Good.